In this podcast, you'll learn about manias and compulsions that some people suffer from. We'll explain the difference between phobias and manias, and we'll tell you about some rather unusual manias that you may not have heard of. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello, and if you're a new listener to the podcast, you're very, very welcome. And if you've come back to listen again, thank you for being here. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And we've been teaching for over 50 years, so we'll help you to improve your English and take it up to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm feeling good, Craig. Really enjoyed that coffee you just made for me. It's given me a bit of get up and go, so I'm ready to record.
I'm pleased to hear it. First, this week, we've got a voice message from Jorge from Rosario, Argentina.
Hello Reza, hello Craig, it's Jorge from Rosario, Argentina. First of all, I want to tell you thanks for La Mansión del Inglés and Aprender Inglés. I want to tell you an experience that I had in a trip some months ago related to the episode 457. I live in Argentina, but I have children and grandchildren who are living in Spain. So I go there every year to visit them and spend time especially with grandchildren. Last year, for many reasons, I took a long flight to come back to Argentina. I missed the connection in New York because of the previous flight was delayed for 4 hours. As I was flying along, I needed to use my English to face the problems, such as get a new ticket to Argentina, localize my baggage, get a place to rest, and so on. JFK is a huge airport. I had to move between different terminals, find several desks, and talk to airport staff. They spoke to me really fast. I asked them, please, speak slowly, but nothing changed. I couldn't understand everything they said, so I became nervous, couldn't be fluid, and finished speaking Spanglish. At that moment, I felt a little frustrated, disappointed, and annoyed in myself because I thought my English level would be better. I started wondering things about the time I spent learning English daily. Quite the effort on my 60 years old. Could I be good enough to do it? But now, some months later, I think that I could solve every problem which I had. And at the end of the day, I'm home. I continue studying English every day and listen to your podcast weekly. Thank you very much again and have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for your message. We really enjoyed listening to it, and I'm really happy that in the end, eventually you managed to solve the problem at the airport and you managed to understand what people were saying to you. And yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You can study English for many years and you can listen to podcasts and you can practice, but when you're actually in a situation where you have to communicate and interact with people in English, then these difficulties sometimes happen, they arise, and you realize that, yeah, you do need more speaking and fluency practice. Now, for people like Jorge or anybody listening who would be interested in a conversation course, that is the kind of thing that I focus on with a small group of students online using Zoom on a weekly basis. If you're interested, if you'd like to improve your fluency and your speaking so that you feel more comfortable in those situations where you need to think on your feet and use English in an everyday situation, send me an email. It's craig@inglespodcast.com and I'll send you details about the fluency course. But let's get back to Jorge's message. Any comments, Reza?
I thought it was a really good message, Jorge, and I understood absolutely everything that you said, which is, of course, the most important thing. However, I did notice a couple of things that we could improve. For example, I don't know if you noticed, Jorge, but a couple of times, instead of saying Argentina, you said Argentina. Understandable, since it's your own country. But remember, in English, it's pronounced J, Argentina. Did you notice anything, Craig?
One or two things, but very, very small things, because we understood perfectly when you said that for money reasons you did something, but it's a more common collocation to say for financial reasons. So last year, for financial reasons, I decided to make the trip, for example. And another example of where we understood you perfectly, but we can improve it slightly. You said I couldn't localize my baggage. I would use the verb locate. I couldn't locate my luggage or my baggage, which sounds a bit formal, but it's fine. You can also say I couldn't find my baggage. I couldn't find my suitcase. I didn't know where it was. I couldn't locate it. I couldn't find it.
You said the word fluid, which exists in English, but it isn't normally used to talk about language ability. A better word for that is fluent. So you weren't quite as fluent as you would have liked. And for that reason, you were annoyed with yourself. You said annoying, but no, annoying, ing, is the thing which irritates you, and you were affected by it. You were annoyed or irritated. So ing causes the problem, and ed, annoyed, feels the problem.
And we're recording this podcast in May 2023. And I think, Jorge, you went to Spain last month in April. So I understand that you are currently here in Spain. And we hope that you're having a great time with your family and enjoying the lovely weather we're experiencing at the moment in Spain. So welcome to Spain.
And one last thing, Jorge, I hope you don't have any problems with your flights back to Argentina this time around, because you said you had problems. You said because of the previous flight was delayed, but the word of is wrong there. It should be just because the previous flight was delayed. Take away the word of. We certainly hope you don't have the same problem when you go back this time, Jorge.
Our next voice message is from Reina from Mexico, who gave us the idea for today's topic of manias. So thank you very much, Reina. This is what she says.
Hello, Reza and Craig. This is Reina from Mexico. This is not my first audio, but I did this because I want to suggest a topic for your podcast. I'm not sure if you talk about this topic in a previous podcast, so just let me know. But what do you think if you talk about manias? This is, for example, when a person likes to eat strange things, such as hair, eyes, dust, paper, or some that kind of strange things. I have heard that this is because the person requires a vitamin or a mineral, and then they irrationally try to get it. And yeah, I think that those are the most common, but I'm pretty sure that there are some others that could be interesting to know about them, and maybe to know if they are an ill or this could be treated as a psychology disorder. And yeah, I think that this would be a good topic to know. Thank you very much, guys, for the great effort for this podcast. I really enjoy it. And thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Reina, for sending in your message. Lovely to hear from you again. And yes, we do have some examples of some very strange manias. Although not eating eyes. I think you said eating eyes. How would you eat your own eye? That would be a very strange thing to do.
Maybe other people's eyes.
Yeah, perhaps. And eating dust. That's a strange, weird one that we didn't come across doing our research. But we do have some examples for you of unusual manias. And we haven't spoken specifically about manias before, Raina, but we did speak about phobias, which are very similar, and we'll explain the difference. But to listen to the phobia episode, if you're interested, go to inglespodcast.com/416 and we'll tell you about some phobias. Any comments, Reza, on Raina's message?
It was a very clear message and a very interesting one, and thanks for the idea. Since we're going to talk about your idea, let's get the pronunciation right. Reina, it's mania. You said it the Spanish way. You said mania or something like that. But in English, it's pronounced mania. And also, you recorded an audio, not an audio. You're saying it the Spanish way, right? You recorded an audio about manias.
And another thing I noticed, I think you said an ill, although illness is the noun, so it can be a kind of illness or psychological disorder. So a disorder that is rooted in psychology is a psychological disorder. And yes, manias can be bad habits, they can be compulsions, obsessions, maybe fixation, or to use a phrasal verb, a hang-up. It can be a hang-up affecting your personality.
So, as Craig has already mentioned, we have a previous episode about phobias. It was episode 416 about phobias. What's the difference between a phobia and a mania? People sometimes confuse them, Craig. How would you distinguish between the two?
Well, according to what I found on the internet, because I wasn't exactly sure myself, but a phobia is an abnormal fear of something. So you're afraid, you're frightened of something, but it's not a usual kind of fear. Whereas a mania refers to an abnormally elevated mood. So you can be very happy, it can be something of great excitement or overactivity, some kind of obsession. And this term mania comes originally from the Greek, meaning madness or frenzy.
Let's talk about some particular manias as examples. We're going to mix some that you may well have heard of with others that we're pretty sure you haven't heard of, just for fun. Let's start with one which you probably have heard of, and I think it's a similar word in Spanish language, kleptomania. Beginning with the letter K, kleptomania, that is the uncontrollable urge or compulsion or desire to steal items that are not needed. And it often results in legal consequences. So you might be a shoplifter, someone who steals things from shops that you don't even need. There have been cases of even millionaires, like of Hollywood film stars who have lots of money, stealing bottles of shampoo. They don't need to steal it. They could buy it. It's not worth a lot of money. But they have kleptomania. They have this urge to steal they cannot control. Craig, have you ever met anyone with kleptomania?
I don't think I have. I mean, when I was very young, my friend and I did steal a couple of things, mainly out of boredom from shops, like some sweets or some chocolate, or a couple of times I think we might have stolen a book from a bookshop when we were young and stupid. But it wasn't a compulsion. It wasn't something I had to do on a regular basis. Have you known anyone who steals compulsively?
Not compulsively, no.
Okay.
But as you say, I think kids often do it out of boredom or for the thrill to see whether they'll be caught or not. Yeah.
That's why we did it, yeah. Now, if you are from Valencia, and Reza and I live in Valencia, you'll be very aware of the firework festival called Las Fallas, which happens in March. And if you visited Valencia, you might think that Valencia is a city of pyromaniacs. Pyromaniacs, the compulsion to start fires, which is what happens on the final day of Fallas, when all the fires are burned in the streets. And this is often accompanied by a fascination with fire and destruction. People, of course, who set fire to buildings and burn down houses, the crime is called arson. So if you are an arsonist, then you set fire to things, and that is a crime that could put you in prison.
Now, not all manias end with the suffix mania. Many of them do, such as kleptomania, pyromania, but some of them are different words. For example, a gambling disorder, or you can also say a gambling addiction. That is the inability to resist the urge to gamble, to bet money. So you pay money hoping that something will happen, like in a casino. If you're right, you win more money. If you're wrong, you lose it all. So gambling disorder addiction is when you can't resist doing this despite the negative consequences you know it could have on your life. You might lose everything. You might be spending money you don't really have, but you do it anyway. If you do that, you have a gambling disorder.
A very common mania is to bite your nails or the skin on your fingers next to your nail at the sides of your fingernails, often so much that your fingers bleed because you've bitten the skin away and there's a danger of infection. This is called onychophagia. Onychophagia, the spelling is in the show notes, inglespodcast.com/466. The habit of biting your nails or your cuticles, cuticles, your cuticles, that is the skin at the bottom of the fingernail.
And Craig, why might people do that? Why bite your nails? I don't myself. Why do some people do it?
Well, as Raina suggested, there are different reasons why people do these things and have these compulsions. I think a lot of them are rooted or based in anxiety or stress, but it also could be something to do with your hands. That's a reason I think why some people smoke or pick their nose, which we'll come on to later. But yeah, these things that involve the hands, it's some fascination or obsession with the hands. And if you do get stressed out and you suffer from stress, then this repetitive behavior, it can help some people deal with or cope with these challenging emotions. Or maybe it's just boredom. I don't know. Maybe just people are watching TV and they're bored, or they're sitting at their desk working and they're bored and they start biting their nails. So Reza, are there any similar habits that people might do resulting from stress or anxiety or boredom connected to nail biting, something similar?
There are a couple which are fairly common, actually, although you probably don't know the word for them, and I didn't until I Googled it. Dermatillomania, you can see the spelling in the show notes. That is the obsessive picking at your own skin, and it can result in skin damage and maybe even permanent scarring. A scar is a mark left after injury to the skin, which will be there forever. So some dermatillomaniacs have scars as a result of their habit.
And speaking of obsessive picking at the skin and your nails and biting your nails, we've got a message from friend of the show, Alex from Ukraine, who lives in Segovia, and that's a pet peeve of Alex's.
Hello, Craig and Reza. This is Alex, who lives in Segovia province. My voice message is in response to your podcast in which you asked us to share our pet peeves. On the whole, among the things which get my goat and drive me crazy, or sometimes even make me go berserk, are those related to a lack of hygiene or respect towards other people. I'd like to mention the following situations. For example, in public transport, when somebody tries to unblock their nose by blowing it in and swallowing it, making that characteristic noise, it's so disgusting. Another case is also about public transport, when somebody near you does their fingernails, cuts, files, or bites them. Apart from that, I don't like when people interfere into other people's affairs, when those affairs don't concern them at all, or when somebody moans all the time. That's it about the things which irritate me. Thank you very much for your attention. See you next time.
So those were Alex's pet peeves. And if you want to hear more pet peeves, go and listen to episode 461. Thank you, Alex. Biting nails. And I think he also said filing nails on public transport. That gets his goat. That annoys him as well.
I like that use of get my goat. That's a nice expression, Alex.
I also liked the way he used the verb to moan, M-O-A-N, which means to complain. Stop moaning, stop complaining. And one thing, a small thing, Alex, the pronunciation of berserk. I tend to stress the second syllable, to go berserk, to go crazy, to go mad. Stress the second syllable, berserk.
And I agree with everything you say, Alex. All those habits you mentioned, I also find very disagreeable in public. I do not like to see them myself, I must say.
Another mania that is quite common, maybe resulting from stress or, as we said before, boredom, is trichotillomania. Trichotillomania, which is the compulsive urge to pull out your hair, resulting in hair loss. Some people twirl their hair to keep their hands occupied, and twirling is just moving your finger or your hands in a circular motion and catching the hair and getting the hair going in a circular motion, just playing with long hair, really. But obviously pulling out your hair, that is more aggressive and more damaging because you could end up going bald and losing your hair. So not a good idea.
Do you know anybody who plays with their hair?
I've seen lots of young girls play with their hair, not so much men, although some men do have long hair, but they don't tend to play with it, whereas girls with long hair, especially teenage girls, they like to play with their hair. Have you?
Well, that makes my confession all the more embarrassing because I do.
Do you?
And I'm not a young girl, believe me. I don't pull out my hair, no, but I must admit when I have long hair, and my hair is quite long at the moment, when I'm on my own at home, never in public, I do sometimes twirl my hair. I admit I do it.
You've also got a beard, and I see some men stroking their beard or touching their beard. Is that something you do to help you think?
No, I don't. I just like twirling long hair when I've got it. Weird. So, like any other young girl, that's what I do.
Interesting. Okay. Now, moving on. What's the next one, Reza?
Let me tell you about the next one coming up. It is melomania. And you might think...
Melons. Somebody who
something to do with
likes melons?
What if I told you a synonym for it? Musomania.
Religion?
Music.
Okay.
An obsession with music. So there's two words. You can either call it melomania or musomania, an obsession with music. Do you get it? That's why I was singing a little bit before I introduced it. If you just can't stop thinking about music or playing musical instruments or singing, you've got melomania or musomania.
Well, that sounds like a mania that's not too damaging or offensive, except maybe if it's for One Direction or reggaeton, perhaps that could be annoying. But generally speaking, that's not a bad mania to have, is it, music?
Not bad, although you wouldn't want to be beside a melomaniac if you were in a library and needed absolute silence to study. It would be a bit irritating, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Another obsession or mania which maybe is not too negative, although perhaps it could be a bit annoying, is an obsession with washing yourself and cleaning yourself, and that's called ablutomania. Do you know anyone who has ablutomania? I know we've spoken before about washing your hands when leaving the bathroom or the toilet, which we like to do often.
Yes, I think we've mentioned that before, haven't we? Craig and me, we both are quite obsessive hand washers, but I wouldn't call that ablutomania because ablutomania is washing the whole body or lots of different parts of the body or showering a lot. I don't know anybody with that But you know what? There's much worse things, eh?
Oh, yeah. Like not showering or washing. Yeah.
It wouldn't particularly bother me to live with an ablutomaniac, except if they were always in the shower in the morning and I needed it. Apart from that, it wouldn't bother me.
Now, is there anything more disgusting than sitting in traffic in your car and looking across and there is a driver next to you picking his or her nose? What's that called, Reza?
Well, those offenders are rhinotelexomaniacs. Oof, let me try it again. So, rhinotelexomania is the compulsion to frequently pick your own nose. Thank goodness your own nose. Hopefully there aren't people who pick other people's noses. That'd be even worse.
There would be, yeah.
So car drivers stuck in traffic, a bit bored, they start picking the noses. They have perhaps rhinotelexomania. To remember, think of a rhinoceros. It has a big long nose with a horn on it, right? So, rhinotelexomania.
Of course, the verb to pick, when you're speaking about noses, obviously means to put your finger in your nose, but the verb to pick can also mean to choose or to select something. So you can pick your nose and you can pick your husband, but you can't blow your husband in public.
No, that's not advisable.
But you can blow your nose.
Indeed. Let's move on swiftly to the next one.
I think we should.
Let's move on to xenomania. Xeno. Beginning with the letter X, there aren't many words which begin with the letter X in English. As well as xenomania, of course, we got the opposite, xenophobia, which you probably have heard of. If you're xenophobic, there's that word phobia, phobic, you don't like foreigners. And if you're xenomaniac, or you have xenomania, it's the opposite. You have an intense attraction to foreign things. I would say I have a little bit of xenomania. I do tend to get attracted to foreign things just out of curiosity. What about you?
Yeah, Indian food, for example, Hawaiian shirts, Swedish supermodels, those kind of things attract me. Italian cars, yeah.
Yeah, as regards supermodels, I don't care about the nationality. They could be Italian, Russian, Swedish, Indian, any type of supermodel will do me.
I think I do suffer from the next one, though, and it's a compulsive fondness or likeness of one specific type of food. Can you guess what it is? The mania is called opsomania, and I'm very fond of chocolate. Do you think I have opsomania?
A little bit, I guess. Yes, I can vouch for that. That means I have been a witness. Craig probably does have a little bit of opsomania regarding chocolate. He does like his chocolate. But could be worse. At least it's not, I don't know, lard, which is manteca.
Yeah.
If he ate that 5 times a day, he might have had a heart attack by now. There are worse things. He does like his chocolate, that's for sure.
The next one, you may have seen a reality show called Hoarders, Hoarders. A hoarder is a person who has a compulsion to accumulate and collect lots of objects and possessions to the point where it interferes with their daily life, and it really does cause problems and distress for the person. And clutter, C-L-U-T-T-E-R, lots of things in your house so that you can't move, and the person is buried, literally buried under their suffering, and it's a very serious disorder, hoarding disorder. Have you got that, Reza?
Do you know what? Probably a lot of people have a little touch of it, but not to the point where you would call it a clinical mania. But I guess I do hoard certain things that I don't need. I think a lot of people have a kind of niche of things they hoard.
What's your niche? What do you like to keep?
Things like unnecessary maps and plans. I really like that. I like keeping like city maps of a place I visited once and know I will never go back to. Why? I don't know, but I just like to keep them. I guess that's hoarding. What about you?
No, I try to be as minimalist as possible. If I notice that I'm collecting things irrationally without any logical reason, then I throw them away. I don't like to keep too much because I have a small flat. And the problem with hoarding disorder is that there's so much stuff, so many boxes, so many things in your living space that you literally can't move, and it ends up being very suffocating.
Now, the next mania is one that I'm sure you probably have heard of, nymphomania. I'll spell it for you in English. It's NYMPHOMANIA, and pronounced nymphomania, which you probably know is the excessive or insatiable desire for sex. Craig, I've never actually met a nymphomaniac, but this is one of the few maniacs that I would like to come across. I would rather like to meet a nymphomaniac out of pure scientific interest. What about you?
Actually, I used to live with one.
Really?
But it's not what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. His name was Danny. And he just loved having sex with women. And we shared a flat together many years ago. Hello, Danny, if you're listening. But he just loved sex. And as far as I know, still does. And just enjoys it. Never got married, but really enjoys the company of females. And very happy in his sex life. Always has been.
As you can imagine, that's not exactly how I imagined it. Mine would be meeting a female and she would want to have sex incessantly with me and she would be gorgeous. But it's just a thought. It's never actually happened yet.
I've got a question for you, Reza. Which came first, electrophobia or ovophobia?
So I'm guessing electrophobia. So this is a fear of something, a phobia.
Electrophobia.
Electro,
A-L-E-K.
Oh, beginning with A, not beginning with E.
No,
Ooh.
electrophobia.
So it's not fear of electricity.
No, focus on the second one, ovophobia.
Fear of eggs.
And the first one? Fear of chickens.
Really?
Which came first?
Brilliant. I like it. That's a good one.
Which came first, the fear of chickens or the fear of eggs?
Oh, brilliant. They've invented a word for the fear of chickens.
Yeah.
Wow, that's brilliant. Craig, have you ever bought anything, let's say online, which you really didn't need?
It's happened a couple of times. Yeah, unfortunately, mainly maybe tech or electronic gadgets that I thought I needed and then realized that I didn't. So it was an urge, an uncontrollable urge or desire to buy unnecessary items. Although it wasn't a serious problem, it hasn't led to any financial problem or hoarding problem with cluttered spaces. So I don't think it's a compulsive buying disorder. What about you?
No, it's never happened to me either. Yeah, we've all bought things that we didn't need. But if you do it incessantly, that's when you've got compulsive buying disorder. What about internet addiction disorder? So it may not necessarily be buying things online. It just means you have to excessively be online and use tech all the time to the point where it's affecting your social life, your work, your mental health. Do you know anybody who has internet addiction disorder?
Not personally, but I suspect that's really common among the gaming culture, internet gaming. You get addicted to playing games online, and then you're playing for 8, 9, 10 hours or more all through the night and depriving yourself of sleep. I would imagine that that's a problem for many people.
We've got a few more. The next one is quite interesting. Body dysmorphic disorder. That is the obsession with perceived, so they may or may not be true, perceived flaws or imperfections in one's appearance, leading to significant distress and perhaps impairment. That means you can't live your daily life in a normal way because you're convinced that your imperfections don't let you do it.
So you don't like the way you look, you're not happy with your appearance.
And as a result, you're not living your life to the full. Maybe you're not going out. Maybe you're not wearing certain clothes. Maybe it affects your mental health. Do you know of anybody who suffered from that disorder?
Again, not personally, although I would imagine that it's got a lot worse the last few years because of the internet and the Instagrammable lifestyle that's supposed to be so perfect, and the perfect body and the way fashion is dictating how people should look. It wouldn't surprise me if it's got a lot worse recently.
Yeah, I bet you're right.
The next one is Anglomania, and you can probably guess with that prefix Anglo, it's an obsession with England or anything English. Anglomania.
Dipsomania is one you may or may not have heard of. It's related to alcohol. And you might be thinking, well, alcoholism, isn't it? Not exactly the same. It's the clinical, unusually severe obsession with alcohol. So every time you see a bottle of wine, of gin, of beer, you think about drinking it or what it might taste like. So it's even more extreme than just simple alcoholism. That is called dipsomania.
And very similar to alcoholism is AIRCoholism, AIRC alcoholism. What's that, Reza?
Oh, alcoholism. Well, in a way, it's perfectly understandable, even justifiable, you might say. It's an obsession with the podcast, Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig, which is often written as AIRC. So if you are an AIRCoholic, you suffer from alcoholism. Now, you might be a full-blown alcoholic. Full-blown means 100%. There's absolutely no doubt. So if you're a full-blown alcoholic, alcohol has ruined your life. There's nothing you can do about it. If you're a full-blown AIRCoholic, AIRC-coholic, you're unable to perform the usual daily activities, all the normal things people do, due to your addiction to this podcast. Some of you might be full-blown alcoholics, or you might just be a functioning alcoholic. That's not quite as bad. If you're a functioning alcoholic, you're addicted to this podcast, but you're still just about able to get through the day as long as you get your daily dose or your weekly dose of AIRC, Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig. Perhaps, listener, you're a functioning alcoholic.
And at this point, we'd like to issue a warning to people listening. So we are here, yes, every week to help you improve your English, but unfortunately, we are not here to cure any of our listeners who are alcoholics. In fact, we actually try to worsen their condition by giving you the best podcasts that we can. So now it's your turn to practice your English. Do you know anyone who has one of these manias? And are there any other manias that you can think of that come to mind that we haven't mentioned in this podcast? We would love to hear from you. You can get in touch by using our preferred method, which is sending a voice message, and that way you get to practice and improve your fluency. And to do that, go to speakpipe.com, speakpipe.com/English podcast, and leave us a voice message of 90 seconds or less. Emails, Reza?
Yes, if you have a fear of recording your own voice, we hope you don't, but if you do, you could always write to us. Send us an email to craig@englespodcast.com or belfastreza@gmail.com.
And don't forget, this podcast is sponsored in part by mentioningles.com. Why not visit the online store? Go to store.mentioningles.net. And thank you, Mention Ingles, for supporting the podcast.
At the end of each podcast episode, we like to thank all those who support the podcast through the Patreon scheme. That's Patreon, Patreon. And what those people do is donate money voluntarily. $1.50 a month is the minimum. And as a thank you for their donation, we give those sponsors instant access to recent audio transcriptions. If you might be interested, have a look at the link in the show notes. It's patreon.com/inglespodcast.
Unfortunately, we don't have time to mention everybody who is supporting the podcast by name individually, but we would like to say thank you to our most recent Patreon supporters who have joined us this month, and they are friend of the show Erasmo Melo, Raul Antonio Gomez, Jorge Alberto Borda, Carmen Jimenez Acosta, Tomás J. Loto, Juan Carles Grau Bermejo, Merichel, Joseph Fafo, Teresa Gil de Biedma, Jorge Juan Manias, Usto. A special thanks to Maria Madariaga, who is donating more than the minimum $1.50. Thank you, Maria, and thank you to all of you lovely people who are supporting this podcast. What's next week, Reza?
Next week's about something I don't know much about, so I'm going to have to Google it. Intelligence.
Yeah, I'm not sure what intelligence is either, but not knowing about a subject, as you have noticed, has never stopped Reza and I from speaking about it. So until next time, have a wonderful week. It's goodbye from Reza.
And it's goodbye from Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.